Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you are, whichever part of the world you are. Big thanks to each one of you who have chosen to join us for this webinar with Kathy. You know, there's a proverb which says, "May you bless in interesting times." There's a blessing. Some people interpret it as a curse. Whatever, we are living in interesting times. Perhaps leadership is facing the ultimate challenge. Leadership not just in politics or government, but across all areas of life. And as Albert Einstein famously said, you can't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. Perhaps that's applicable for leadership too. It's time for leaders like us, all of us, every one of us here, to look at leadership from a different angle. Is there something that we can do about it? And one of the options could be to embrace emotional intelligence. So Dr. Daniel Goleman, one of the leading voices in emotional intelligence, says EQ is 4 times more important in determining success of an individual than IQ. 4 times more important. So hence, my friends, the topic that we have chosen for today's webinar is emotional intelligence leads to resilience during a time of change. And who else can speak on this topic than Kathy, who is a PCC and ISEI. She helps organizations create better leaders. She's a keynote speaker, published author, executive coach, and a lot more. She just shared she's also a grandmother of 8 grandchildren. So beautiful. She helps clients to explore and define their identity as leaders based on the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence. She has hosted a TV show, she has been part of a radio show, and of course, she's a published author. And the title of her book is Shh, Just Listen. And a lot can happen in silence, right? One of my favorite spiritual quote is, "It's in the depth of silence that the voice of God can be heard." Beautiful. So over to you, Kathy. Thanks for accepting this invite to address us, coaches, and over to you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Subhash. I am so excited to be here. Welcome, everyone. We're expecting more. We're at 100 participants. So if you could mute yourself until it's time to talk, it will be interactive. So I will share with you guys. We will spend some time in the chat box. And then there is an activity that I'm going to do with you guys where you will need a pen or pencil and a piece of paper. So this will be very interactive, okay? So I am excited to be here. We're going to talk about resilience during a time of change, how we can be resilient. So we're going to start off by looking at the definition of resilience. And it really is the ability to be able to bounce back, to resume your normal shape, if you will. And sometimes being able to bounce back means that not only do we resume a normal shape, but sometimes we have to create a new norm. But being resilient, recognizing our personal power, then we're able to do that. So I'd like to start off by sharing a story of resilience. And this story happens to be about someone near and dear to me. It's my daughter and her family. So taking a look at my daughter and her family, she has 3 boys and a husband. And I'd like to share the story that I frequently, back in the day when we used to be able to travel, I would travel around the globe teaching seminars. And this particular week, I was in Tennessee, in Michigan. And normally when I am traveling, I treat myself to a nice dinner. And so I'm in Tennessee, I've landed, checked into the hotel, I'm out at a restaurant, and all of a sudden I get a call from my daughter. And she is screaming and crying over the phone. And so it seems like that had gone on for about 10 minutes. But I know it wasn't 10 minutes, but it seemed to be 10 minutes. And what she shared with me over the phone was that her husband had passed away. and I was in Tennessee and far away from my daughter and couldn't get back. So I leave the restaurant, I go back to the hotel, I'm trying to call the airline to get a flight back, and there were no flights available. From there, I told my husband, I'm going to drive home. He says, nope, you're not going to drive home, not with this hanging over your head. It's a 14-hour drive. So I was forced to stay in Tennessee until the following day, 5 or 6 o'clock in PM before I could get a flight back. So what did I do? I had to go ahead. I decided to go ahead and facilitate the training that I was there to facilitate. Things that were on my mind was, how would she tell these 3 boys about their dad? Her mom was out of town. How would she do that? So because I couldn't get a flight back, I prayed about the situation. I prayed for strength, for sanity, to be able to facilitate this class. And the class was entitled 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team. The last activity in that training, it asked all 12 participants to sit in a circle, and they had to answer 2 questions. Where did you grow up? And what was your greatest childhood challenge? Some of the stories that those men shared had actually been an answer to my prayer. Many of them had grown up without a father. Some of them had grown up hungry, living in alleys, had been tossed aside by foster parents. But to see them heal and see them be successful in this situation, somehow it made me know that my grandsons would eventually be okay. I had made a choice that morning to tap into my resilience to be able to teach this class. Not knowing how I was going to do it, prayer definitely helped. But when we're struck with adversity, we do have a choice to tap into our personal power and decide to become resilient. So with that thought in mind, I want you guys to take just a moment and think about a time in your life when you were resilient. Think about a time in your life when you were resilient, and maybe you didn't even recognize it at the time, but you were resilient. Once you've thought about it, I want you to think about how long ago that event happened where you displayed resilience. And type in the chat box how long ago that was, a time in your life when you were resilient. And I'm going to give you 60 seconds to think about this and type in the chat box how long ago this event was. Okay, I see some 5 years, 1 month ago, 15 years, 9 years, 3 years ago, 10 years. Okay, 3 years ago, 14 years ago, 1 year ago. Okay. Thank you for the responses. Someone said daily. Yes, we can be resilient on a daily basis. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, many times. So thank you for all of the responses. So really keeping in mind, we all have the ability to tap into this resilience. So for the event that you thought about, I want you to also think about what worked for you, what didn't work, what did you do? As we go through our presentation, we'll talk about how using emotional intelligence and tapping into our personal power can help us. So we've thought about that time when we were resilient. Really, emotional intelligence is the key to tapping into the ability to be resilient. As Subhash mentioned, Daniel Goleman says that EQ, or emotional intelligence, is 4 times more important in determining the success of an individual than the intellect. So it's been said, IQ will get you hired, but EQ will get you promoted. So in years gone by, so many times a hiring decision was made solely based on a person's IQ, their intellect. But as we evolve and we have become a global society, emotional intelligence is 4 times more important in determining the success of an individual. So let's talk about the definition of emotional intelligence, if you will. So this is the definition in the dictionary. It's about being able to be aware of your own emotions and manage those emotions. So this is my definition. It's being able to have an emotion in the moment, to name that emotion, to validate it. Then you're going to decide, how do I manage this emotion? And then manage myself and manage the social setting that I'm in. Emotional intelligence allows you to be able to respond to a situation instead of react to a situation. And I'll give you an example of how that plays out in real life. So how many of us are familiar with road rage? We've either seen it, or maybe we were the person that was in a state of rage. But let's take the example of road rage. Someone cuts you off and you're angry. When we're emotionally intelligent, we're able to say, ugh, I'm angry. The validation is, I have every right to be angry. That person crossed my boundary and endangered my safety. Now, what do I want to do with this anger? Do I want to flip this person off? Do I want to maintain my composure? What do I want to do? Emotional intelligence allows you to make a decision as to how you want to manage the emotion and manage yourself. The interesting component about being able to validate our own emotions is when we experience an emotion, let's say an emotion of anger, and it's very intense. Once we validate that emotion, it lessens the intensity. And from this space, we're able to decide how we want to manage that emotion. So that piece, being able to validate our own emotions, is important. Sometimes we can be in a conversation with someone and we're talking and we're feeling frustrated. And really what we want for them, we want them to validate our emotions so that the intensity will lessen. Now, it's great if we're in a relationship or in a discussion with someone who can listen and validate our emotions, but it's even better if we develop the ability to be able to validate our own emotions. It's also important to remember that emotions aren't good or bad, they just are. So passing no judgment for experiencing an emotion, they aren't good or bad, emotions just are. They come to us unbidden, and we get to decide what we want to do with them. So what determines the value of an emotion is what we do with the emotion. So that whole emotional intelligence piece, it's being able to have an emotion in the moment and name it, validate it, being able to decide what we want to do with that emotion, managing ourselves, and then managing the social setting that we're in, and even being able to pick up what's going on with other individuals. The interesting component about this is only 36% of people tested are accurately able to identify their emotions in the moment. Isn't that amazing? So only 36%, about a third. So what I'd like for you guys to do is, I'd like for you to take out that piece of paper and that pen, and I'm going to give you a moment to do that. And I am going to give you guys 60 seconds. And what I want you guys to do is write down as many emotions as you can think of in 60 seconds. I'm starting my timer. You may begin. "30 seconds in. "5 seconds left. 4, 3, 2, 1. Time. Now, what I'd like for you guys to do is total the number of emotions you were able to write down, and then type that number in the chat box. Wow, you guys are doing pretty good. I saw 15 is the highest number. 15, 3, 15, 8, 12, 11, 9, 17, 14, 5. Okay, 14. 20, someone got 20. Nice. 15. Okay. You guys did pretty good. I'm impressed. Someone says, I didn't count. I'm hungry is the emotion I feel. It's that Bhaskar. Okay. Name it. I validate that emotion, Bhaskar. Go grab something to eat. You are so validated. Okay, so what I will share with you guys, you did pretty good. Most often when I am, let's say, in automotive and I do this exercise, they're typically individuals that work in the auto industry. They're typically able to name 4 to 6 emotions. In healthcare, it's somewhere around 15 to 17. I had an opportunity to do this with a group of social workers, and they were actually able to name 27. So I want you guys to take a guess. How many emotions do you think there are? If we could total all of the emotions, how many do you think there are? Type that in the chat box, please. Okay, someone said 100, 50, 40, 120. Someone said infinite. About 50, 30. Over 200, Sheena says. Pandu says 140. Priya says a lot. So thank you for your responses. I will tell you that a person can experience over 34,000 emotions.
Oh my.
So when we think about, I know, right? When we think about our emotional vocabulary, it's so important because it helps us to accurately describe how we're feeling, and to be able to articulate and accurately describe how we're feeling can lead to resilience. I'll give you an example. My husband and I, we were having this discussion. So we both come home from work and we both say, I'm tired. Okay, so that both means we're both tired. Okay, so we're both gonna still go in the kitchen and cook because we're both hungry too, right? Okay, Bhaskar? So we're hungry and tired. But suppose one of us comes home and says, I'm exhausted. That gives way to the thought, I have nothing else left to give. So if I'm tired and my mate, my husband, is exhausted, then I'll muster up some energy and maybe cook some hot dogs or something, because he has communicated that he's exhausted. And so there is a difference between the two. So being able to expand our emotional vocabulary to accurately describe how we're feeling can lead to resilience. And I'd like to give you guys a resource for being able to expand your vocabulary. There is a book that's out. It's called Permission to Feel. And there is a vocabulary map where you can work through that to expand your vocabulary. Any thoughts or questions on this before we move on? Okay, let's keep going.
I'm sorry, could I have the name of the book?
Permission to Feel.
Okay. And who's the author?
Oh, let me see. I just finished this book and it's absolutely amazing. I can send the resource to Subhash and he can send it out to you guys. How would that be?
Thanks so much.
Okay, yep, I can do that. It's by Mark, M-A-R-C, Brackett, B-A-R-C-K-E-T-T, Mark Brackett. There you go. Thank you, Goldie. Okay, let's continue. So let's talk about the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence. The first piece is that self-awareness, being aware of what's going on with yourself, and then being able to manage yourself, that self-management piece. Then because you have done this for yourself, you're aware of what's going on with others, and then you're able to manage the relationship. So it's that old saying, love your neighbor as you love yourself. You have to know who you are. You have to understand your emotions and what's going on with you before you can recognize those emotions in others. So it's the 4 quadrants: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness. That means you can look at other people, read their body language and see what's going on, and then make a decision on how to manage the relationship. Now, in those 4 quadrants, when we talk about emotional intelligence, there's 26 competencies. Okay. So these are the 26 competencies that are listed here. And the self-awareness piece talks about our personal power. And that personal power is huge in being resilient, because we have to make a decision to tap into it and use it to be able to bounce back or to create the situation that we're looking for. Under the self-management piece, again, it's making the choice to be resilient. And so having personal agility and be intentional about making that choice. So a lot of times I will interact with my clients and I hear them give their personal power away. They take on the verbiage of a victim, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But recognizing that you have personal power and you can make an intentional choice to use your personal power. Again, and because you do that for yourself, you can recognize what's going on in others. So you may display qualities of empathy. You have situational awareness. So you can walk into a meeting and read the room and tell what's going on. Or you're engaged in a conversation where someone may say they're okay, but their body language doesn't display that. And so when we think about human communication, body language is 55% of human communication. Tone of voice is 38%. Words are just 7%. So when we are aware of what's going on with others, we're watching their body language, we're listening to shifts in their tone of voice. And then after we've taken a look at what's going on, the awareness of others, we make a decision as to how to manage that social setting. So we build bonds, we build trust. And so when we think about, these are all of the ways that we can manage relationships. Communication, teamwork, and collaboration. We can be an inspirational leader. So these are the competencies of emotional intelligence. If you guys are interested in an emotional intelligence assessment, you can talk to me. I'll give you my email offline. We can talk about an assessment and how you can work to improve in these 26 competencies. The important thing with emotional intelligence is to build a healthy relationship with yourself. So I want you guys to take a moment and think about, how would you describe the relationship you have with yourself? How would you describe the relationship you have with yourself? Take a moment and type it in the chat box. How would you describe the relationship you have with yourself? Sangeetha said intimate. Muhammad said great, I love myself, friendly, wonderful, at peace. Aran said I love myself, authentic. Someone said I'm my greatest friend. Someone said struggling, that's okay. Challenging, that's okay. That's keeping it real. Remember, it's a place of no judgment. Someone said critical, ups and downs, honest, searching. I love you guys, honesty, fabulous. I play a different role as per the emotions I go through, honest and friendly. Oh, wow, thank you guys so much for sharing. We have a wide range, thank you. So really thinking about the relationship we have with ourselves, because however we treat ourselves will dictate how we treat other people. So if we tend to be critical with ourselves, we're critical with other people. And even if we're in the situation where we love other people more than we love ourselves, you're off balance. So think about in the days when we used to be able to fly, the oxygen mask comes down. Who gets the oxygen mask first before you assist other people? So many times, many people will give themselves away to other people and have nothing left. So we're going to talk about, how do I develop a healthy relationship with myself so that I can be resilient, so that I can tap into my personal power. Okay. So I want to share with you the number one reason people say they don't take the time to develop a relationship with themselves, or they don't take the time for self-care, is they say, I don't have any time. I'm always busy, busy, busy. And then the other emotion that people share as to why they don't engage in self-care is because they feel guilty. So when we think about the emotion of guilt, we know that somewhere people believe they have violated their moral compass. And so when it comes to self-care, individuals that typically feel guilty about self-care, somewhere in their mind, and maybe in their upbringing, they feel they're not worth it. So you have to explore that emotion of guilt to find out what's making you feel guilty about self-care. And the nice part about it is, once you put it out there and look at it, as an adult, we get to decide what we want to do with it. Guilt is a heavy emotion. So if you walk around with the heavy emotion, feeling guilty, it's difficult to tap into your personal power and become resilient. So you really have to think about, if this is true, if you're feeling guilty about self-care, take a deeper dive and say, is this something that maybe was instilled in me when I was young, when I was a child? And does it still work for me? We have the opportunity to let it go and do something different. Okay. The self-awareness piece. So a lot of times when we are self-aware, it means taking a look at ourselves. It means coming face to face with ourselves. And sometimes that's not always easy. So my tagline as a life coach, I say, I specialize in creating a space to introduce people to themselves. Because sometimes we have to come face to face with ourselves to find out why we may not engage in self-care. Or we have to admit that we have a lot of emotions that we experience, and maybe in our mind, we've judged ourselves as those emotions are bad emotions. But coming face to face with ourselves means that we can experience a wide range of emotions and work through them and not feel guilty about them. So I had an opportunity to do training at one organization, and we talked about the emotion of jealousy and anger. And so I was talking about anger is typically an emotion we feel when someone has crossed our boundaries, and we need to do something to reestablish boundaries. Most often we need to have a conversation, a crucial conversation, but we feel fear behind having that crucial conversation, so we don't have it. So I talked about sometimes when we're angry, an underlying emotion may be jealousy. You have that coworker on the job who's always getting all the breaks. They seem to get all the promotions. They seem to get all the attention. And you're angry with them because that's an easier emotion to go to, because for some, anger empowers you. But one person came up to me after my presentation and said, all of this time I thought I was angry with my coworker, but deep down inside, I'm jealous of her. So when we have that self-awareness piece, we're able to come face to face with ourselves and really look beneath the surface to see what emotions we're experiencing. Any thoughts or questions? Oh, I see someone said phenomenal visual. Yes, this visual is in my book. I absolutely love it. Someone said great tagline. Thank you. Thank you, you guys. Okay, let's continue. And someone drew a scribbly on the my screen. It wasn't me. Okay, so fear. Let's talk about fear. Fear often will hold you back. And it's okay to be afraid. That's a normal emotion. Remember, they come to us, our emotions come to us unbidden. It's like we don't often invite them, they just bubble up. They're sending a message to us. And if we have a great relationship with ourselves, we will take time to listen. So that was what motivated me or inspired me to entitle my book, Shh, Just Listen. Great things happen in the silence, because you have to create the space to listen to yourself, to listen to what your body is trying to tell you, because all emotions manifest themselves somewhere in the body. So if there's anger, you might feel tense in your shoulders, in your back. If there's fear or sadness. So with these 4 emotions, fear, anger, sad, happy, there can be a plethora of other emotions lurking underneath. But you have to take the time to listen and see what your body is communicating to you. Thank you, Melwin. She says, I agree with you. Thank you so much. All emotions manifest themselves somewhere in the body. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how full is your bucket. This is another training that I do. And it's based on the theory that we have an opportunity to replenish ourselves. Every day we have an opportunity to replenish ourselves. And when we consistently replenish ourselves, it can affect our health, happiness, productivity, and our relationships. But on the flip side, If we're consistently empty, we may feel internal pain. How many of you have given of yourself until it hurts? If you have given of yourself until it hurts, type in the chat box what it feels like. I know for me, I get a lump in my throat and a pit in my stomach, and it's my body's way of saying, what about me? What about me? So that is, someone put resentment, painful, sadness, regret, back pain, like a bus has run over you, pain in my stomach. Okay. So that is proof. All emotions manifest themselves somewhere in the body. So when you think about tapping into your personal power to become resilient, it's difficult to do that if we're feeling resentment, if we have this pain in our stomach, or if we're tired and want to go into a deep sleep. So it's so important to be able to create the space that we listen to the needs of our bodies, our entire being, and we respond. So we're going to talk about ways that we can fill our bucket or our cup. And so think about, we have 3 glasses here. One is empty, one is half full, and one is completely full. The thing to remember is when we're working or interacting with people, every day we're going to give of ourselves. Every day. So you will either give from an empty cup and you will feel the pain. You will give from a half full cup, and depending on how much you have to give that day, you may still feel the pain. But when you're giving from a full cup, you experience the phrase, the principle, there is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. That's only if you have something to give. If my cup is empty and I'm giving, I'm not feeling happiness. I'm feeling a knot in my throat. I'm feeling resentment, pain in my back, pain in my stomach. So you have a choice every day of how you present yourself to the world. You get to decide. When we operate from a full cup, we can tap into our ability to be resilient. Can't pour from the empty cup. That's so true. This is an abundance mentality. Yes. So Melvin says, how do I fill my cup? You must have peeked at my next screen. So we're going to talk about how do we achieve balance and keeping our cup full, and thinking about how do you care for your emotional well-being. So there's 4 components to us as individuals. There's mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. On a daily basis, we should tap into those and make sure we're pouring into our cup. Mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Okay? So think about, how do you fill your cup emotionally? How do you care for your emotional well-being? It's important to recognize that, because when we are moving through change, and we have had a lot of changes on a global basis. We've had the pandemic. We've had the injustice that has taken place. We've seen so many visuals on TV that had impacted us. So when we're moving through a change, because our world has changed from what it used to be. We used to feel a sense of security. We used to be able to travel. And now we have gone through a significant change. And so when we're moving through change, it's interesting to note that we experience some of the same emotions we experience as when we lose someone in death. The difference is, when we lose someone in death, people recognize that and they show kindness and compassion and empathy. But when we're experiencing change, people are not as kind and compassionate. We don't get bereavement days for moving through change. So these are some of the emotions that we experience in moving through change. And so thinking about, we've been in this change for quite some time. So thinking about, I like to call this the emotional roller coaster. So when we think about the pandemic and all that's happening in our world, type in the chat box, where do you think you are on this emotional roller coaster? So Goldie says, what about when you lose someone during a pandemic? You can fall into the trap of forgetting your own story. You absolutely can. And give yourself time and space for that, because that's part of the grief process. You may be in shock. You may be in denial. So be kind to yourself. Allow your space, the time to grieve, permission to grieve. Give yourself the space to grieve. So I lost my mom 6 years ago. And when she first passed away, I received some good advice from a grief counselor. And she said, create time and space to grieve. So every day for the first 6 months, I would come home, put on her robe, I would light the fireplace, and I'd sit in front of the fire and I'd journal. And I'd cry, but I created the time and space. Okay. So I see a lot of different answers. Someone said I fluctuate. Grief is not linear. It's not. So one day you can feel like you're acceptance, and then another day you can feel like you're back in anxiety or denial. So I have a raised hand. Let me see your raised hand again. There's a question. If you can type your question in the chat box, I'd be happy to answer it. Oh, thank you, VG. She said it was a beautiful way to grieve. Yes. So creating that time and space. So go ahead and type your question in the chat box and I'll try to get to it, okay? All right. So let's talk about how we can care for our physical well-being. So making sure that we have some kind of exercise every day. Our bodies were made to move. We were created to move. We have become a very sedentary society, but when we move, our body creates endorphins that makes us feel powerful. I know after my workout in the morning, I feel like I can conquer almost anything. So really creating that space, give us ourselves an opportunity to move our bodies. And then as you're moving, listen to how your body is communicating with you. The muscles, do they feel good? Are they sore? Are they tired? And then tend to that. Be in tune to what's going on with your body, your temple, if you will. Let's talk about how do we care for our spiritual well-being. So for me, I am an avid Bible reader. I do a lot of praying, but I also love spending time in nature. Meditation, yoga, all of these things nurture my spirit. And so it will be different for every person. A lot of times people think spirituality is only defined by religion. And that's not necessarily the case. You have to develop your spiritual routine. What's your formula for nourishing your spirit? When I'm in nature, I feel like I'm a part of nature. So Melvin said, I love Psalm 91. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah. So be intentional about nurturing your spirit. It's so important. And you will know when your spirit is nurtured. It's an amazing feeling where you just feel like you're one. So when I asked you guys to describe your relationship with yourself, a lot of you said internal peace. That comes from nurturing your spirit. Then let's talk about our mental well-being. So creativity, becoming a continuous learner. Meditation is also good for our mental well-being. We're able to slow down and focus on the breath. And when I am meditating, this is also a time that I listen to myself and what's going on with me. And I'll give you an example of a meditation that I do that helps me to become really good at coaching, being comfortable sitting in the silence. I close my eyes and I take a deep breath. And as I blow out my breath, I ask myself, what am I thinking? And I really pay attention to what I'm thinking. My next breath in, I scan my body and I ask myself, what am I physically feeling? Because remember, all emotions manifest themselves somewhere in the body. So if I'm aching physically, I want to tap into that to see what's going on with me. And then the third breath is, what am I feeling emotionally? And typically, emotions will bubble up from the gut. And as I feel my emotions moving up, typically when it gets to my throat, I can name the emotion. And I sit there for about 10 minutes and I repeat that cycle. Then when I'm done with that, I grab my journal. Here's my lovely journal. And I just write whatever came up during that meditation, whatever came up. So meditation is so good for mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Someone's drawing on my screen again, Subhash.
Oh, God.
Kathy, you can go to security and I will disable that anointing. Somebody shared it here. So Priya, Nasser, you can share how to do that.
Actually, if you go on top to your view options,
You can disable it.
on the black screen, you'll click and you can see annotate.
On top.
Top or bottom, wherever your toolbar is, where it says you are viewing Kathy's screen.
It will
I
be on
see
the
security.
top only, mostly,
So
where you
just
can
go-
see view options.
View options and you click on that and you'll see annotate.
Okay.
And when you go to annotate, you can clear the screen.
Eraser will be there.
And don't use the eraser. There's a clear screen. If you're the host, you can clear the screen.
Okay. I don't see that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you see
I see annotate, but I don't see clearing the whole screen. I can still continue.
Click on annotate. Have you clicked on annotate?
Yep, I see annotate.
Now click on that.
I did.
And then you get a host of options.
No host of options.
Oh.
Yep. So I'll continue. I can work through it. I'm sorry, you guys. All right. So thinking about our mental well-being. So the next thing I want you guys to think about, type in the chat box, what are some things that you might do? Commit to one thing to fill your bucket, if you will, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Just take a moment. Type in the chat box, what are you willing to do to fill your bucket mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally? Okay, sit in nature, reflect, meditate, meditation, daily running, run in the mountains and meditate, beautiful. Write a journal, meditate, awesome. Listen to music, awesome. Yoga, meditation, prayer, all right. Wonderful, you guys. Just be. That takes a great relationship with yourself to just be. I love it. Okay, let's continue. Now, sometimes what happens is we will make a commitment to ourselves that we're going to do something different, and we fall into the victim loop of giving our personal power away. And so when something happens, whatever it may be, a change, when we're dealing with a situation, there's two ways that we can view it. We can either become a victim or we can go into the accountability loop. When we become a victim, we give our power away. And typically we will fall in the victim loop because of imperfection. And so when I'm teaching this to certain groups, I talk about Adam and Eve. When Adam committed sin and God said, "What have you done?" He said, "It was the woman you gave me. She gave me the fruit, so I ate." And so he placed blame. So when we fall into this victim loop, we tend to place blame on other people. It's not our fault. And we rationalize, we resist, and we hide. So these are all emotions and behaviors that show we are giving our personal power away. We do have another choice that will lead to resilience. That means it's the accountability loop, and it takes effort because it's an upward spiral where we recognize the situation, what's going on. I'm going through a change. We own the portions of it that we can own. We forgive ourselves. So when the pandemic first happened and everything was shut down and I had to sit at home, there were some mornings I'd wake up and say, oh, what am I going to do today? There's a pit in my stomach. And somehow I would go through my morning routine of prayer, meditation, journaling, and I make a list of things I want to accomplish during the day. And it gave me a sense of ownership. And on the days when I didn't accomplish those things, I could go to forgiveness. Sometimes forgiveness means forgiving yourself or forgiving others. When we hang on to resentment and anger and bitterness, it can rob us of our personal power and energy. So that forgiveness is crucial. We do a self-examination. So what part of this can I control? What did I learn from this? We learn the lesson and we take action. So when you think about, some of you said, I want to improve the relationship with myself. How can you do that? Moving into the accountability loop. Some of you have committed to yoga, meditation, running. Be committed to go into the accountability loop. So Sunil says, where would let go fit into the accountability or victim? Letting go is the forgiveness piece. So it would be in the accountability loop. Great question. Yeah. And sometimes the big piece is we need to forgive ourselves. So don't want to forget about that. So I want you guys to think about what's your formula for self-care, for tapping into your personal power and resilience. When we're full, it's a lot easier to tap into that space and not fall into the victim loop. I have a video here that I want to show you guys. It's less than a minute. Let's do it. Thinking about the victim loop.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help! Help! Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is it?
So we can see they gave their personal power away. They were victims. The solution is take your personal power and walk off the escalator. But notice there's two individuals on the escalator. So be careful who you surround yourself with. Are you going to surround yourself with people who say, come on, let's take our personal power and walk off? Or do you find yourself sitting with someone and just complaining and giving your personal power away? It's the personal power that leads to resilience. So one thing that you're going to do to strengthen your resilience, type that into the chat box for me. They can walk up. All right, very nice. Accepting the way I am, reflecting more. Beautiful. Forgive. Get up early. Believe in myself. Relax and pause. Improve 1% daily. Let's kindness. I love it. Beautiful. Stepping into love. So I'd like to bring you guys back to the family we started with, my daughter. And they are doing exceptionally well. This happened 3.5 years ago. And these are the boys now with their mom. They're doing very well. They've gone to therapy, and they've had help from their congregation. And this single mom even finds time for a night out on the town and enjoys herself, her alone time. They are doing well. So thank you for allowing me to share my story of resilience and my daughter's story of resilience. And I also want to give you guys an opportunity to continue your journey on increasing your emotional intelligence. I have my 30-day workbook. It's available on Amazon. Next month, I'm hosting a 2-hour class. And I will send Subhash the information to register on Eventbrite. I host Meaningful Mondays on Instagram. Every Monday, I explore a new emotion, and I'm creating a space for individuals to get to know themselves. And another option that you have is you can host a Zoom book club meeting, and I will attend if you'd like. You can do it in your organization, a department team, or a group of friends. And that is my email address if you're interested in that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining. I will hang around another 5 minutes. If you have questions, I'm here. Thank you guys so much. My pleasure. Thank you, Prakash. My pleasure. How to stop jealousy. So jealousy, if you take a deeper dive, it's really a sense of insecurity. There's a whole chapter on jealousy in my book, but it's a sense of insecurity. So somewhere in yourself, you feel like you're lacking something. So you need to spend some time there to figure out what you're lacking so that you can take a deeper dive, and then you can fill yourself up so that you can feel more secure about yourself, so that you're not in that space of being envious or jealous of other people. Thank you guys so much. What is the root of the difference between people who are resilient and people who are not? So people who are resilient recognize that they have a choice and they tap into their personal power. People who are not resilient give their personal power away. And you will hear them, they have a victim mentality. They say, let me tell you what the ATM machine did to me. Or let me tell you what the gas pump did to me. Or they never, they always. You will hear their verbiage where they have given their personal power away. When one recognizes a blessing in disguise with the benefit of hindsight, where does it fit in? Victim or accountability? So means that you're looking back on a situation, it turned into a blessing. That's the accountability piece, because you're doing a self-examination and you're learning the lesson. Great question. I love it, you guys. If you are not resilient, would you say you are committed to surviving and otherwise you are committed to thriving? Well, I think that goes back to a mindset. And so if you are committed to surviving, then you've given your personal power away. Individuals who thrive recognize that it's going to take effort to go into that accountability loop, which will lead to resilience. You guys are so welcome. Name of the book is Shh, Just Listen. Great Things Happen in the Silence.
Kathy, there is a question, how do you handle guilt?
Guilt, okay.
Yeah,
so when we're feeling guilty, again, somewhere in your mind, you have violated your moral compass. So I talk about this emotion in my book. And so I was in my 30s, when I was in my 30s, 20 something years ago, whenever I sat down for self-care, I felt guilty. And so then I would pop up again and just run until I fell over. But I did the work and I took a deeper dive into why do I feel guilty? The guilt came from, I never saw my mom engage in self-care. And I always measured my worth as a woman and I compared it to my mom. Well, once I did the work, I get to decide on my value and I chart my own path. There are some things I love about my mom that I emulate, but there are some things that I say, that doesn't work for me. And so once I let go of the guilt, I can now engage in self-care. Many people will call me the self-care guru. So it's the moral compass that you have internally when you're feeling guilty, you feel like you've violated. So you got to find out what you've violated and then look at it and see if this is your moral compass or is it a moral compass that someone has imposed upon you. Great question. Any practices that could help us catch our emotion in the moment? Meditation. So thinking about what do I think? What do I physically feel? What do I feel emotionally? The more you experience emotions in the moment, and you can capture that during your meditation, when you're interacting with other people, you will be able to name that emotion in the moment. So meditation is important. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts before I jump off? Okay, so I will send a few more resources to Subhash, and then Subhash, you can email them out to the group. Thank you so much. Please reach out to me if you have any more questions or you'd like to take advantage of any of the trainings that are coming up. And thank you, Subhash, for having me. It was absolutely wonderful.
Kathy. Thank you very much, Kathy. It was a great session. Thanks to everyone who chose to join us also. Have a great
pleasure.
Evening. Good day to you,
Thank
Kathy.
you, Kathy. Thank you, Subhash.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Bhaskar. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Hi, Sharima. How are you? It's good to see you. Thank you, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Subhash.